You know, I'm asked all the time, Trey, what is going to be the catalyst to make AMC have its freaking momentous, monstrous prophecy day, right? And I've thought about that question a lot, and I didn't have an answer for a very long time. And I watched what I'd consider to be Matt Coor's best interview to date with Mark. This is a phenomenal interview. On Twitter, if you want to check this guy out, his name is Alder Lane Eggs. And this is, I think, what has answered my question. It's a very solid interview, and it is what happened in January, right? And I've got a couple of things that I kind of want to go over here. But in January, you had, this sort of fluff circus, as Mark says, congressional hearing, and people are talked to. You've got Roaring Kitty gets pulled in. You've got Vlad Tenev. You've got Ken Griffin. You've got Melvin Capital. You've got all these big parties that are essentially just dancing with each other, right? They're saying a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of bullshit, and not really getting anything done. But at the end of the day, what actually was accomplished? What came out? What truth came out? What answers did people have as to the reason behind why the buy button was stolen? Because ultimately, nothing ended up happening. We talked about it. We saw that the buy button was taken away, and people lost money and this and that, right? But at the end of the day, I don't think the news and media and the feds really truly understand the magnitude of the consequences of that. Billions of dollars were stolen from people like you and me and anybody. I remember at the time my account had $40,000 in it, and at the end of it, I had like 10 grand. I got smoked, cleaned out, absolutely freaking demolished, And that happens to a lot of people. It happened to a lot of people, and they're just pretending nothing even happened. In fact, you've got gamification. Instead, it's experts weighing in on brokers being the problem, that you're just basically telling people they should gamble. They should buy these stocks instead of actually addressing the problem, which is, why do people want to buy these stocks in the first place? Why not Tesla? Why not X? Why not Y? Why not Z? It's always pointing fingers at the little guy and saying, how can we get these guys to not buy this given security? How can we get them to not buy this stock, instead of actually looking at the problem? You've got freaking people like Iceberg Research coming out and saying, hey, we're short on AMC stock and we think it's overvalued and the apes got this all wrong and blah, 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 blah. You've got all this sort of nonsense coming out, right? You got Citadel Securities out of nowhere starting to come up and try and cover their butts about conspiracy theorists and plaintiff lawyers and this and that, and using very specific words as to try and defend themselves. That's not a coincidence, my friends. And I want to go back and I want to talk about what I think the most important takeaway from this video is, which is January 27th, the day of all of the nonsense, right? What actually ended up happening? Well, you guys better not forget it. And if you weren't a part of this movement back then, the buy button was taken away. To me, this is comparable to 2008, where you've got millions and billions of dollars, which was transferred from one party, coincidentally enough, the poor to the rich once again. And what actually ended up taking place here? Well, if you watch my video reacting to the conversation that Charles Gasparino had, talking about Ken Griffin and talking about Citadel and this and that, I pointed out that I think it's a bunch of bullshit. That I think politicians and the feds and big banks and firms are all sleeping with each other, holding their dongs in each other's hands and beating each other's meat. And I do stand by that statement. And I want to talk about what actually happened, right? So you have 100 million shares of free float back in January. This is a number that I pulled from right here. And on January 27th, you had 1.2 billion shares worth of volume. It doesn't mean that there was 1.2 billion shares that day, but what it does mean is there was that many shares that essentially were transacted, right? Whether there was a buy and a sell, it went back and forth in that way. And how is that even possible, right? I'm not even going to get into the naked short thesis and all that sort of stuff, because I don't really think that's as important as taking away the buy button. I want to show you guys why I think the buy button was taken away and the lead up into that sort of move, right? So I got what appears to be a pyramid drawn up right here. At the top, you've got 100 million shares. Right, let's check this out. Who's at the top? You've got banks. Banks essentially will buy and hold shares, not even in anticipation of a favoring of any given stock, but more so that they can have transactions filled between different firms. For example, Citadel, right? They maybe they like the stock, that think it'll increase in value, and they do make money in that sort of way, but they accrue a cost to borrow, an annualized interest rate, by lending out stock, so it's in their best interest to be able to do so. So they will. And they have X amount of shares that they own for transactions, both short and long, so they can borrow that stock out. out. Now you've got Citadel, the firm, right here on the second tier of this pyramid, who wants to go and buy some shares. They create their own short position, right? They borrow shares from these banks so they can sell them into the market. That is their established position. They say, all right, look, we're good to go. The same thing with Melvin Capital. They want to short this stock, and they do so, right? And then the third tier is this, Citadel, the market maker. And this is where payment for order flow and conflict of interest, I think people really just need to wake the fuck up, not retail, because these guys aren't sleeping. You guys aren't sleeping, right? It's these freaking people that are just sleeping in bed with each other that apparently just don't care. They just look the other way. But Citadel, the market maker, now reacts to whatever's taking place by retail. So they will take care of orders from retail. They'll fill those orders as well as hedge against them because they're in the business of what Mark would call a spread, right? They want to manage the risk. They want to hedge against risk, and that's a necessity, right? That's something that they have to do. So they'd hedge the orders of retail. And at the bottom of this tier, you've got Robinhood and other brokers who ultimately go through Citadel, through payment for order flow, to get orders filled. So in this big freaking, what I would like to call pyramid scheme of the current stock market, you have this order. You've got banks, Citadel, the firm, market makers, then brokers, and then at the very bottom, you've got retail who are getting their actual orders filled. Now, I call this a pyramid scheme very bluntly and very seriously because I think the stock market is a big freaking pyramid scheme, currently the way that it's built, to take money from those who don't know any better, who will just sit there and take it like a good boy, like a good girl, because that's the way that it's always been. And they got busted pissing on the electric fence. It got freaking turned on. And these guys are getting freaking zapped. They're getting zapped. And you know what they did? They stopped buying. They took away the buy button. Why is that happening? Why would that happen in the first place? Well, this brings me back to January 27th, 1.2 billion shares of volume, right? Why would you have that much volume? Because you have this circle of events taking place right now. A firm establishes a short position. And in the case of Citadel, for example, who is a market maker, essentially meaning they take care of transactions of retail and institutional investors, as well as their own firm. They have their own positions that they manage. They established a short position. And then you've got retail. Let's say they establish this position at $2. Retail decides they want to buy up a stock. The stock goes up, right? Now all of a sudden, market makers as well as Citadel themselves have to hedge their positions or double up on their positions or cover their positions. And what happens when the supply of a stock runs out? This is why I've said many, many times, I do not think naked shorts are something that just float around in the market on any given day. This is a momentum sort of thing where you can physically see when the game is getting fucked. When the game has a cheat code in the back, you were not given that code, right? You'll know it. You'll see the stock. You'll see the price because you see it right here with freaking AMC. You see that thing happen before your eyes. And this process repeats over and over and over and over and over and over. And where the true damage is done, I don't even think is with shares. It's not with the shares right here, right? The traditional short interest, sure, you could very possibly have naked shorts. But where's the true problem here? Contracts, calls, puts. What ends up happening with calls and puts? Well, they need to be hedged for by market makers. And what is coincidentally something that AMC has going for it that many other stocks do not? It is the most heavily traded derivative in the stock market. And if not the most, one of the most. It has an exponential amount of calls and puts that are constantly being traded on a week to week to week basis that need to be hedged for, right? And when these actually hit, when they hit hard, they got to be bought. The shares coinciding with those have to be bought. And sometimes that means, in the case of AMC and GameStop, that there's just not enough shares for the transaction to take place. And you get naked shares created, which creates what you just saw back here with 1.2 billion total volume on any given day on January 27th, right? I think personally, that's my hypothesis behind what actually happened, but that's not even what I want to make this video about. I'm gonna wrap it up with this. I'm gonna keep it nice and short, right? Why and how was the buy button stolen? Ultimately, I think that is the most important takeaway to grab from this video with Mark, this interview with Mark that Matt Coors did a phenomenal job on, is why and how was the buy button taken away? Was it nefarious? I think it's very obvious to me that there was very obvious problems that did go down in conversations that were had, whether it was between Citadel and Melvin Capital and Robinhood and feds and politicians and XYZ. Somebody made a decision in order to prevent melting of big firms. And ultimately, I think if you want the catalyst that is going to drive AMC stock up, what is the better catalyst than to be proved you were fucking right the whole time? that you were right the whole time. And these guys pretend like it's you, that you're just a gambling addict, that you are just wrong, that you guys are just prophesizing. That Citadel had nothing to do with it. Citadel thinks, we have our hands clean. We wiped that clean back. Didn't you guys see our bullshit congressional hearing way back in the day, right? That we already went over this. No. You want a catalyst, guys? I think I've got it for you. You find out. People make enough noise. They talk to somebody. They make this known. The facts. The reasoning behind why the buy button was stolen, you will get your catalyst. And this is, I think, the last thing that I want to say. This is a conviction stock. AMC, I'm just going to freaking say it. If you're sweating over the 1 minute candles, if you're sweating on the day-to-day price action, if you're sweating over a weekly expiration call option, this isn't your fucking stock. It's not. It's not. This stock, to me, is about conviction in wrong, right? This is a wrongdoing. This is wrongness and unfairness and unjustness. This game, you're playing a game of chess and you have checkers pieces while these guys are filling the board with queens. It's outrageous. I mean, that's what this is about. You're speaking out against nonsense about a market that was built to keep the people at the top. And you want to make noise, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to. So that's what I'd love to see, man. I'd love to see it. And that interview, Matt, you did a phenomenal job. And Mark, you laid some freaking scunion, some filthy scunion. I was pretty jacked to hear all this sort of stuff. And ultimately, I think the enemy, guys, is much more complex than people are making it out. I think you have market makers, options market makers, Citadel, right? All these big players, they're all tied to a lot of different stuff. Banks, politicians, the Fed, right? Somebody had to make that decision to take away the buy button. And ultimately, I want to know, why was it taken away? Who is the enemy? Who's the reason that people lost billions of dollars? That people lost out of something they could not control, just like in 2008. They got absolutely butt slammed. Butt plugged, right? You're sitting back here with one of those diamonds and you can't pull that thing out, man. It's pretty freaking disgusting. And I want people to forget that. Don't forget that pain. Don't forget that anger, because all this did for me was reinvigorate, right? And that's what I've got for this video. So blah, blah, blah. Do what you want to do. Like and subscribe, whatever. Catch you on the next one. Much love, light taps. Peace.